I did top 40 or contemporary hit radio for the first third of my career. And when I was in it, the business had, us guys in the business had well learned that that kind of station, that kind of format, could not play many more than about 35 records and win in any ratings races. And that's not counting recurrence and oldies, 35 chart records or new records at any given time, 35 records of this month. Now, if you were the only top 40 radio station in town, picking and playing some lousy non-hit singles wouldn't hurt you all that much. People in their cars might hit the button, switched over to the R&B station or the country station or the AC station, but they'd be back pretty soon because there was no other station in town that had that full what's happening today music mix. Now, the target audience for CHR radio is teens to about 30 years old, and that demographic always wanted, and still does, always wants to hear the best new songs of the moment. And top 40 radio station's the only one giving it to them. Still, I knew there was a lot of good music on that R&B station and a lot of good music on that country station that would not be playing on my CHR station. And I wanted to avoid giving my listeners so many reasons, so many opportunities to click over to those other stations to hear what was going on over there. And that's what non-hit records do. They get people to hit the button to the other radio station for a while. It's a conundrum. Listeners to this format want to hear new music, but they only want to hear the new music that they like. Well, now, how are they going to know they like that new song unless they hear it on the radio? Unless they hear it a few times in the music mix of their own current favorite songs. Radio began to lose its monopoly as the portable, take-it-anywhere music source right at the end of the 90s. The MP3 file sharing was the first breakthrough, and that came in the late 90s. And then this century, streaming took over. Broadcast radio is no longer the music discovery source for most people. But the format it still works. The format is about 35 records. 7 to 10 of them are the biggest hits of this moment, the ones that are selling, that are streaming the most this week. And then there's another 15 to 20 so new songs that show promises of being one of the top 10 songs before people tire of them. And then there's 3 to 5 brand new songs. These are the happy surprises, we hope, for people. So the big question is, how are you going to pick those 3 to 5 new songs that you add to your new music playlist each week? Well, here's what I did back in the 1900s. Back in the 1900s, there were 3 trade charts that were on my desk each week. The first and most important one was the Radio and Records newspaper charts. It had hit charts for 6 or 7 different formats: CHR, urban, country, album rock, adult contemporary, and a couple of others. Next was the Gavin Report. Bill Gavin had created the very first top 40 national DJ chart in 1958. Both of these publications' charts were compiled from weekly reports called in to their offices by music and program directors of some top-rated radio stations across the nation. There were no more than about 75, maybe 150 reporting stations. And then there was the Billboard chart. Now, the Billboard chart's based entirely, at that time, is based entirely on record sales, which meant that it was weeks behind the R&R and Gavin charts that were based on radio airplay, a compiled radio airplay from their reporters. The Billboard chart was the one that, in the end, confirmed whether a record was a hit or not. The Billboard chart told me what to keep in oldies rotation next year and the year on down the line. Gavin and R&R helped me cull through all of the new and unfamiliar records that hit my desk every week. The Gavin chart listed 50 records, and 4 or 5 of those would be underlined in the chart. And that indicated that those were the movers, those the ones that had gotten the most new ads that week, or the ones that had moved upwards, had the most jumps on the individual radio station top 40 charts. And most radio stations made and published their own music chart for their market every week at the time. The smart ones did anyway. Radio and Records did that too. They called their top moving songs each week breakers. So I am in my office with my three charts and all of the new records that had arrived from the record companies in recent weeks. Now, first, I listened to the songs that were underlined in Gavin and marked as breakers in Radio and Records. And then I would re-listen to a handful of other records that had been sitting on my desk for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks or however long. I was complimented several times in my career early on as a guy who had good ears. Now, that meant I was better at picking the hits out of the bunch. I was a little better at it than most guys, but I learned early on not to trust my first impressions. It was a Spanish band, a Spanish rock group called Los Bravos. It had a really big hit record in 1966 called Black is Black. I didn't hear from them. You didn't hear from them again until 68 when they released a song called Bring a Little Lovin'. Killer intro. I loved this song from the first 5 seconds. I called the receptionist in and the traffic director and said, listen to this. Gosh, and I played it for them. Loved it, loved it, loved it. It peaked at number 51 on the Billboard chart. Laid an egg. It was never worth playing to begin with. And it made me a lot more cautious over trusting my own good ears there. A few years later, I finally figured out the way to work around those first impressions. I'd been making my new ads choices based on the Gavin songs and the breakers and R&R. What my ears told me about the song's viability, but that wasn't enough really. What was missing? It occurred to me, actually, that it came to me from a music director that I hired when I was in Virginia Beach who did this. She listened to the records a couple of times a day, all week. And after about 7 or 10 days of regular exposure, she made the decisions about which songs she was recommending to me that we add to our radio station. And I soon saw that this woman was really good at picking the few songs out of the big stacks. Her accuracy rate was really good. She could pick the hits, the few that would ultimately make it into the Billboard Top 10. And that's what I wanted to play. I really only wanted to play Top 10 records, right? When I moved on to the next radio station, she was not there. I adopted her system myself. I carried copies of the new records home and would listen to them there. And I'd always done it auditioning at the radio station. I would also sometimes copy the new songs onto cassette tapes, which I could play in my car as I was driving around. I got familiar with the songs before adding them to the radio station, and my accuracy rate for picking the hits improved. That's what you should take away from this little lecture. Use your charts, use your data. There's a lot more data available to you now about music consumption than I ever had. That data will give you a leg up if you study it closely and you look at who's buying the records, who's streaming the records and such. You won't have to listen to 24 new songs every Monday and Tuesday. You watch the buying, the streaming patterns of the new songs in your format, and you see the titles that are getting the most attention within that group of listeners that you want to attract, your target demo. Then you listen to those songs, and you listen to them again, and you listen to them again. And if you can listen to the song all the way through after hearing it 8 or a dozen times over a couple of week period, then you can make the best decisions about the new songs that you're going to choose to put into your music mix.